Hello and welcome to the World Today right here on China Global Television Network. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. We begin with our top story this hour. Chinese President Xi Jinping has ordered all-out rescue and relief efforts after a mudslide in Nepal hit the Girong border port in southwest China's Xizang Autonomous Region. At least 8 people have been killed and more casualties are feared from the mudslide in Nepal, which was triggered by flash flooding. The disaster has cut off roads leading to the port on the Chinese side, as well as communications and power supplies. Girong is a major land port connecting China and Nepal. Turning to the Middle East now, where Iran says it has restarted talks with neighboring Oman to manage the Strait of Hormuz. The two countries say they discussed a joint temporary navigational corridor through the strait and agreed to clear it of mines. But U.S. President Donald Trump says all mines in the waterway have already been cleared. This comes as Tehran has denounced new U.S. sanctions aimed at isolating its economy as an act of gross lawlessness. Iran says it is fully prepared for the expanded U.S. sanctions. Isan Kevani reports from Tehran.
Unlike past sanctions, the new pressure seems aimed squarely at the small informal channels that everyday merchants have been using to quietly bypass restrictions. Those blockades have made the Iranian merchants, in fact, using those back doors, and those back doors are closing fast, and that could make countering the sanctions much harder than before. The real cost, of course, is falling on ordinary Iranians. They are the ones on the front lines of this economic war. And in just the last 3 days, the national currency hit an all-time low with $1 crossing 2 million reals. And this is a shocking psychological and financial blow for everyday people in Iran. Inside the country, analysts and traders are warning that if this trajectory continues, Iran could face serious shortages in raw materials, food, and other critical supplies. Add to that the growing gasoline crisis, and the picture gets even more worrying. So, yes, officials insist they have a plan, but the real question isn't whether they are prepared, it's what the final price tag will be in Iran and who ends up paying that.
Meanwhile, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian says China's cooperation with Iran has always remained within the framework of international law. He made the remarks in response to a question about a threat by the U.S. to intensify sanctions on Iran that will also target Tehran's trading partners.
China's cooperation with Iran has always been conducted within the framework of international law and should not be disrupted or undermined. China is closely monitoring relevant developments and will take all necessary measures to firmly safeguard its legitimate rights and interests.
Meanwhile, Nick Harper reports on how Washington's attempt to isolate Tehran's financial partners could backfire on the U.S. economy.
Domestically, I think there's a lot of worry here in the United States about what it could potentially mean. Scott Bessent detailed about 60 companies, entities, individual ships as well around the world who have now got sanctions placed on them. But there's also that threat of really a blanket sanction on any country that deals with Iran and continues to use it as a trading partner. The worry in the United States is that those countries, if the US follows through with its threats, could impose retaliatory sanctions on either US businesses or perhaps put some blanket tariffs in place on US goods, all of it potentially increasing the cost of living here for US consumers at a time when they have been seeing the effects of the conflict with Iran, keeping inflation high, rising the cost of goods and increasing, of course, the costs of gasoline, petrol for motorists at the pump. So I think some concern for US consumers seeing this play out and really worrying what the backlash might be for the United States and US companies and consumers.
An Israeli airstrike has destroyed a newly operational desalination plant in Gaza City. Separate Israeli strikes also hit multiple Gaza neighborhoods and 2 mosques. At least 9 Palestinians, including 1 child, were killed. Rami Almigari reports now from Gaza City.
Abruptly on Monday, Israeli warplanes began a series of military actions in the Gaza Strip, starting with this desalination plant in the Sheikh Radwan neighborhood in Gaza City. The plant was destroyed only after 5 days of having been operating in the area and serving more than 50,000 Palestinians in the neighborhood. And this plant, yes, was created 2 months ago after the area was cleaned out of some garbage, some rubble, as suggested by the ones who operated this and who worked on having this operating in the area of the Sheikh Radwan neighborhood.
We opened the plant just a few days ago to help people and ease their suffering, so they could at least have access to water, the most basic necessity of life. But unfortunately, it was bombed based on Israeli claims that it was being used as a weapons storage facility.
How long will this war continue? They are lying to us. We are exhausted and cannot take it anymore. Look, this is my home. It was completely destroyed after we had already been displaced several times to the south. We came back hoping to settle here, but there is no safety. Where are we supposed to go?
15 families were affected here, with more than 60 people sheltering in this area. Our home over there had already been destroyed, and I was temporarily living on the rubble of the house while waiting to get a tent. Now we have lost everything.
This plant comes against the backdrop or the destruction here of a series of other Israeli warplanes operations in different parts of the Gaza Strip, including the Shad refugee camp, Deir el-Balah town, Al Bureij, where 2 mosques were hit. One of them is an ancient one, and these operations have come abruptly in the territory as political efforts are underway to contain the situation and move forward with the second phase of the ceasefire. An Israeli army statement suggested or said yesterday on Monday that the Israeli army hit different weapons storage places and locations in the Gaza Strip. That was the Israeli army's statement here in the territory. Last but not least, at least 9 Palestinians, including a child, were killed during these Israeli military actions throughout different parts of the Gaza Strip. Rami Almigari, CGTN, in the Sheikh Radwan neighborhood in Gaza City.
Russia says it has launched strikes on Ukrainian cargo vessels carrying military supplies, including 3 at the Black Sea port of Diphtheria and another in the nearby port of Odessa. Its forces have also attacked Ukrainian port infrastructure in Diphtheria and Odessa, as well as fuel storage facilities at the port of Chornomorsk. Ukraine says it has struck multiple Russian targets overnight, damaging equipment and facilities in Rostov, Luhansk, Crimea and Zaporizhia. A Russian MiG-29 fighter jet was reportedly hit in the attacks. At least 14 newborns have been killed in a fire at a state-run hospital in Pakistan's Islamabad. Local broadcaster GeoTV reports the blaze was started by a fault in the air conditioning system at the Pakistan Institute of Medical Sciences. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has ordered an immediate investigation, calling for those responsible to face the strictest action. The fire broke out in the mother and child health ward, which housed 16 newborns at the time. At least 1 baby was rescued.
I have a 3-day-old son. How can they say that all the children were banned when none of them were banned? They say we have to save the adults first. We saved them. Why were they saving adults? They could have got out on foot. Why didn't they save the children first? Why was the children's ward locked? After 2 hours, the rescue team arrived, and after 4 hours, the police came. Why? All the officers went around like AC, DC, and they have no idea what they will do if one of their children was killed.
The 25th round of border talks between special representatives of China and India has been held in Beijing. China's special representative Wang Yi co-chaired the talks with India's special representative and national security advisor Ajit Doval. Wang Minjie has more.
A comprehensive, in-depth and candid communication. This is how Chinese Foreign Ministry describes the 25th round of talks on boundary questions and bilateral relations between China and India. As important neighbors to each other, Wang Yi said the scope of China-India relations have gone beyond bilateral matters. Wang said the top leaders of both countries reached important consensus during their meetings in Gaza and Tianjin, pointing out the direction and providing impetus for the improvement of bilateral ties. He said the two sides are implementing the consensus reached during the special representatives' meetings and gradually building a positive narrative on Sino-Indian border issues. Noting that India and China are partners rather than competitors, Ajit Doval stressed India's willingness to further enhance strategic communication with China, deepen multilateral collaboration, effectively manage border areas, explore solutions to boundary issues, and accelerate the development of bilateral relations. The mechanism of special representatives meetings of China and India is an important platform for communication on issues of major interest. The Chinese Foreign Ministry describes it as a main channel addressing border issues so as to jointly safeguard peace and tranquility in the border area. Wang Mengjie, CGTN, Beijing.
And that's all we have for you on this edition of The World Today from us here in Nairobi. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Do stay with us.
Holding guns towards protesters. Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
Excellency, thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Nigerian president orders military to mount rescue operations for people kidnapped from a mosque in Niger State. UN Security Council raises concern about hunger and peace as African nations face conflict and changing weather. And we find out why local and international artists are flocking to South Africa's small town of Barrydale. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN, wherever you're joining us. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Here's what else is coming up. In business, Africa's largest telecoms operator MTN Group rolls out plans for fintech services in key markets. And in sports, Africa's record signing Yan Diomande is officially presented as a Real Madrid player. Welcome to the program. Now, at least 50 children have been killed and several others hospitalized in an outbreak of diphtheria in Nigeria's northwestern state of Kano. Most of the deaths were recorded in the Ridin and Sabuwar Kaura communities in Rano local government area. The outbreak has spread to towns across 6 local government areas. Lawmakers are urging the government to invoke the state's health protection law to contain the outbreak. Now, the representative for Rano said limited emergency services had been taken so far, including the provision of medication and deployment of health workers. Diphtheria is a disease caused by a bacterium that affects the upper respiratory tract and sometimes the skin. It also produces a toxin that damages the heart and the nerves. And staying in Nigeria, President Bola Tinubu has ordered a rescue operation for scores of people who were kidnapped by gunmen in north-central Niger State last week. The directive was issued to the military and other security agencies after gunmen posted a video on Facebook and WhatsApp showing what residents said were about 600 people taken from a mosque on Friday. Authorities are still verifying the number of missing, but if confirmed, it would rank among Nigeria's largest and most brazen mass kidnappings in recent years. An official from Borgu district, where the attack happened, said 30 people had been killed during the attack and were buried on Sunday. Mass abductions for ransom have become increasingly common in the country's north, and while the government has intensified security operations in the region, attacks do continue. Now, the 76th session of the World Health Organization Regional Committee for Africa has formally opened in Addis Ababa. Top on the agenda is domestic health financing and one of the deadliest Ebola outbreaks in the region's history. Leaders are calling for coordinated efforts to enhance national health systems that contribute to continental health sovereignty. Becca Atoma now reports from Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa.
The 3-day WHO meeting has brought together health ministers from across 47 African countries, along with global health leaders, to discuss the continent's health priorities for the next 12 months. In his opening remarks, Ethiopian President Taye Asqe-Selassie said the meeting takes place as the continent stands at a turning point.
Today, Africa stands at a pivotal moment. We face a rapidly shifting global environment where health financing is becoming unpredictable, geopolitical instability tests our multilateral institutions, and disease outbreaks continue to threaten lives and economic stability. Yet, these profound challenges offer a historic opportunity for Africa to strengthen its collective voice, deepen regional cooperation, and assume full ownership of its health architecture.
The Ebola outbreak in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, which is the second largest in history with over 5,500 confirmed cases and over 2,600 deaths, was high on the agenda.
Our experience shows that Ebola can be controlled. The challenge today is not only knowledge or tools, the challenge is access. We therefore appeal to all parties to support a humanitarian truce of at least 6 months, allowing health workers safe and unhindered access to the affected communities. Because when health workers reach people, transmission stops. When they cannot, the virus continues to spread. Peace is one of the most powerful medicines we can provide.
For the Africa Union leadership, the response to both the financing squeeze and the outbreak comes back to one core idea: building health systems the continent can sustain on its own terms.
African health sovereignty starts with effective national health systems. The African Union Commission remains fully committed, alongside with our member countries and continental institutions, towards that goal. We will stand here to renew our collective engagement towards more coherence, better implementation, and gradual self-reliance.
Today's opening only set the tone. Over the next couple of days, health ministers will dig into how to finance the future of health in Africa, how to regulate medical products across the continent, and how to plan, train and retain the health workers who keep these systems running, among other key agendas, altogether aimed at putting Africa's health landscape on a new path. Beka Atoma, CGTN, Addis Ababa.
And still with that story, conflicts are increasingly disrupting food systems and driving global hunger levels. That is the warning from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who was addressing the Security Council in New York. He cited the UN's latest hunger hotspots report, which shows that conflict and violence are the primary drivers in 12 out of 13 hunger hotspots of greatest concern. Guterres and other officials highlighted the devastating humanitarian impacts of the conflicts in Sudan and Gaza and the strain that the U.S. war on Iran adds to global food supplies.
It is no coincidence that 2025 saw not only the highest number of armed conflicts since World War II, but also among the highest levels of global acute hunger on record, with at least 266 million people facing acute food insecurity. 2025 also marked the first time this century that 2 famines were confirmed simultaneously in Sudan and Gaza, a shameful milestone. The UN's latest hunger hotspot report shows that conflict and violence are the primary drivers in 12 out of 13 hunger hotspots of greatest concern.
Starting with the conflict in the Gulf, an oil tanker anchored in the Strait of Hormuz can mean 1 less meal a day for a child in Sudan, where basic food costs are up almost 40% since February this year. And food systems rely on fuel, irrigation, transport, milling. So when oil prices go up, so does the price of flour, rice, and vegetables.
Right, for more on this story, I'm joined in studio by our reporter Enoch Sikolia for more and to break this down further. Enoch, obviously a major concern here. The UN Security Council debate on food insecurity did touch at length on the impact of conflict on food. How is this then affecting the African countries?
Now, when you look at it, conflict, for example, is like a double blow to the African continent, where we have now the direct impact, where active conflicts in places like Sudan, the Sahel, and the Eastern DRC, where I've been, move farmers. They move farmers from their farmlands, and we're talking about millions. When you look at the Sahel, when you look at Eastern DRC, they leave their farmlands. They are forced to live in IDP camps, and that has a direct impact to food production, because these farmers are no longer in their farms. Their farms are empty, so no one to tilt. Then when you look at the indirect impact, now we have to look at the global conflicts, whether you are talking about in Europe, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, whether you are talking about the Middle East, where now the conflicts affect the choke points like the Red Sea and also the Strait of Hormuz. Now the impact is indirect, because now the cost of moving fuel, which is important in agriculture, the cost of moving fertilizer. For example, we have many African countries that depend on imported fertilizer. Now it becomes very expensive to produce like agricultural products, because now these commodities become very expensive because of global conflicts.
Right, and staying with the African continent, there is, of course, another big cause for concern when it comes to food insecurity, and this is, of course, weather and climate. You have been reporting extensively on this. What are you seeing on the ground?
Well, when you go on the ground, especially in Kenya, what you see is quite different and shocking, because when you move across these agricultural zones, you see lush farms, you see green zones, and probably will think these farmers are going to have a bumper harvest. But the reality is quite different, because there have been long periods of, or long dry spell periods, and especially at the crucial stage of development when we are talking about maize. Now, so what you are seeing, they're just green stems, green maize plants. But actually there's no maize, or in some places very little maize. And so it has led to a shortfall. And that is why Kenya is planning to import about 25 million bags. We are talking about 25 million bags. And most times, in situations like this, Kenya only imports during times of hunger and starvation. But now we are seeing the government coming in earlier to import maize. It just shows the problem that is on the ground. Now, I'm just coming from Uasin Gishu and Trans Nzoia, which is the northern part of Kenya, and I filed this report that just shows the impact of climate change. From the face of it, it looks like farmers from this part of Kenya are going to have a bumper harvest. Endless fields of green maize dot the landscape, painting a picture of abundance. But when you zoom in, there is nothing. The cobs are empty. The harvest that farmers waited months for never came. For generations, Kenya's North Rift Valley has been known as the nation's breadbasket. It is here, across the vast plains of Uasin Gishu and Trans Nzoia counties, that millions of bags of maize are produced every year. But this season, the landscape tells a different story. Hey brother, what really happened here?
What happened here, it is about drought, and this is about famine. The rain was not enough.
Months of failed rains have left behind a silent disaster.
I have nothing from my farm. It is zero, that is loss, a big loss in my pocket.
The consequences extend far beyond these farms. The Rift Valley historically produces more than 40% of Kenya's maize supply. When the breadbasket suffers, the entire nation feels the pain. What makes this crisis particularly alarming is that many farmers didn't realize the extent of the damage until it was too late. The maize plants germinated, they grew, and from a distance, they looked okay. But the prolonged dry spell struck at the critical stage of development, preventing the grain from properly forming inside the cobs. This one doesn't have anything.
Yeah. Now, if you can look at this, if you can look at this maize. Again, look at the size.
The size itself
is
again.
You know, this
normally
6, but now in a good harvest, almost 3 times. Let's say up to this size.
Up to this size.
Yes.
And it's now here.
And this again, to make the matters worse, if you can
open inside.
Yes, if you can peel of it.
There's nothing.
There's nothing.
At least you have something.
No, but you see. Again, if you see, there's a lot of spaces here. Look at the space, and then look at the size of the grain.
But this one is empty, totally. There's nothing.
Sure.
You can see, this is an empty corpse.
So it is actually pathetic, because in a good now look at this. You know, there's a lot of space. You see, and so this can be the best today of harvest, which is actually opposite of what we've been harvesting over in these particular areas.
And you see, you can also see it's actually infested.
Now again, you know, this is like when there is no rain.
For thousands of farming families like Kiptalam, the losses are measured not only in money, but also in hope. Many invested heavily in seeds, fertilizer, labor, and machinery. Now they are left counting losses. Driving through Kenya's North Rift region, the scale of this crisis becomes impossible to ignore. Kilometer after kilometer, field after field. It's clear farmers are confronting the same reality. What should have been the most productive season has become a season of uncertainty, threatening both national food security and rural livelihoods. Kenya Seed Company Managing Director says the crisis is creating a dangerous chain reaction.
And we've seen that we are going to have a challenge next year as far as food is concerned, especially commercial farmers, the people who produce food.
Have you ever seen something like this?
This is very, very, very challenging in my experience. And as a government officer, we've not seen drought of this magnitude before, affecting directly farmers.
To make the matters worse, alternative crops like millet that have a certain tolerance for drought have also done poorly.
If you see this millet, as far as they are up to this place, it is just the rain that they got when they germinated. They have survived up to this time without rain.
A poor harvest in the Rift Valley often translates into higher food prices across the nation. Experts warn that increasingly erratic weather patterns are making farming more unpredictable. For communities whose livelihoods depend on the rains, every failed season depends vulnerability. Enoxikoria, CGTN.
Fascinating reporting from our very own Enoch Sikolia, who joins me still in studio here. Enoch, you've just returned from Kenya's Rift Valley, which has, of course, seen drought. And we've not even touched on a major issue upcoming for East African farmers, which is, of course, the El Nino. What can we expect in the coming months?
So, according to the weathermen, the period between October and December, we are expected to have more than the normal wet periods. That's what we're calling El Nino. So the rainfall will not be normal. It will be extreme rains in parts of East Africa and the Horn of Africa. So when looking at it, governments are now running against time just to put in place measures that will reduce actually the impact of El Nino. In Africa, most of the times, and especially when we talk about East Africa and the Horn of Africa, floods actually cause devastating impacts to the communities, to the people. And so the government, for example, the Kenyan government, what I've seen is that they are trying to come up with ways that will reduce the impact. We've seen even drainage systems being enhanced in major urban centers, and especially we're talking about the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, that usually experiences floods whenever it rains, and whenever it rains heavily. So besides that, the emergency response have been put in place, and actually what I've just heard from government officials is that they set up a committee to look at the response. And one of the issues they're looking at is how they can move people that are in areas that are vulnerable, like, for example, in areas that are prone to not just flooding, but mudslides, landslides whenever it rains. So it's a big call for the governments in East Africa to just make sure that emergency responses are already in place to mitigate the serious impacts that could be caused by El Nino.
Okay, a critical few months ahead for the East African nations. Enoch, thank you very much for your insights and for speaking to us on the program. Enoch Sikolia, CGTN reporter, joining us in studio with his reporting. Well, we're staying in East Africa, where Tanzania's Vice President Emmanuel Nchimbi has said he will resign from office on September the 4th on his private Instagram account, barely a month after calling on rights groups to fight for a new constitution. Nchimbi said he had written to President Samia Suluhu Hassan informing her of his decision to retire from politics and public service and relinquish the vice presidency. The president's office has now officially confirmed receipt of his resignation. Nchimbi will become the first Tanzanian vice president to resign since the country gained independence in 1964. He was sworn in last November after running alongside Hassan in the October presidential election. Well, it's time for us to take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on Africa Live. We find out why local and international artists are flocking to South Africa's small town of Barrydale. You're watching Africa Live. Thank you for staying with us. Now, located at the foot of South Africa's Langeberg Mountains, the small town of Barrydale is becoming an artistic hub, attracting creatives from across the country and beyond its borders. Surrounded by epic landscapes and a serene environment, residents hope this does not erode its unique character. CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa has more.
Artists gather for workshops, exhibitions and creative events at the Karoo Art Hotel. They are inspired by the surrounding mountains, open skies and rugged landscape. Barrydale may be small, but its artistic footprint goes beyond South Africa's borders.
Barrydale has become a destination for me to bring artists to from around South Africa and obviously internationally as well.
I think what draws the artists is the openness. And it's almost like a blank page. It's like the empty page to explore and be inspired and find new things that kind of drive you to create. So there's the water, there's the mountains, there's the big sky, there's so much here.
Scott Hart has lived in Barrydale for 22 years. He and his associates collect used plastic bottles and make chandeliers, one of which was hung in the White House during the Barack Obama presidency.
We're a gallery space and a studio space that specializes in making elements and pieces out of found medium, or upcycling as people call it today.
Meanwhile, a local non-governmental organization is using this space to inspire the younger generations. Here they learn crafts and puppetry, developing their imagination while creating performances for the community.
These are puppets, but we have to put life into these puppets. And I think the whole process of thinking and exploring that the object is a living being also create something in the minds of the youngsters that make them believe at the end of the day. And for us living in a small community, many of the youngsters hasn't even been to theatre.
Beyond its art, Barrydale offers mountain hikes, natural springs, antique shops and a quiet rural atmosphere. But as more people discover the town, residents worry about preserving the town's unique identity and culture.
Barrydale is one of the last towns that has characters, real characters, and we hope that, it doesn't change, and if progress happens, gentrification happens, but we don't really want to change our town's character. But it's a robust little town, a lot of people are moving in here, and we just hope that these people are going to keep this little quaintness of our town.
Barrydale is located about 3 hours east of Cape Town on the road leading to the Garden Route. Wilkista Nyabwa, CGTN.
Right, and it's just about time for the business. Here are your headlines. Africa's largest telecoms operator, MTN Group, rolls out plans for fintech services in key markets. And Burkina Faso revives production of medical cotton amid rising imports. In business, Africa's largest telecoms operator, MTN Group, is exploring banking licenses in select markets as it looks to expand lending from its own balance sheet. CEO Ralph Mupita said MTN is stepping up its push into fintech services to drive growth beyond traditional telecoms revenue. This is as lending has emerged as one of the fastest growing segments within its mobile money business. MTN currently provides loans through partnerships with banks. The telco is also betting on digital infrastructure growth. It plans to develop AI-enabled data centers in South Africa and Nigeria through the Africa Data Hub holding. The venture, with an undisclosed UAE-backed investor, will see development of AI-ready data center infrastructure across key African markets. The Africa Mindset Reset Forum has kicked off in Rwanda's capital, Kigali. Leaders on high-level panels and keynote addresses focused on dismantling cycles of dependency and low expectations. This included opening reflections on moving from shared identity to aggressive institutional execution. CGTN's Zawadi Mudibo with that report from Kigali.
Well, I am here in Kigali, and it's the first day of the Africa Mindset Reset Forum. And government leaders, nearly 1,000 of them, including policymakers and young people, the change makers we are talking about, have met to begin conversations around how the continent can be transformed. But one key message is clear, that Africa's transformation will only begin with how the continent thinks about itself, how it leads, and how it acts. Moving from the consciousness to agency and focusing on what the continent can process or is processing rather than what Africa lacks. And leaders are calling for ambition that is backed by institutions, accountability and execution.
Imagine something that our Pan-Africanists imagined of a continent capable that can go into negotiations with a proper information, education, the confidence, and the willingness to do what it is that helps our continents to grow and be sustainable. That is also very, very important.
You know, there's the Africa we want has been repeated so much. Yes, there's Africa we want. Why can't we have the Africa we want, since we have everything in place? So it means there's something we have to identify that keeps failing us.
We are searching for answers to some of the questions, what is to be done, practically, seriously. That is, young people must stay with that struggle until indeed the Africa we want emerges.
And as President Kagame has said, that the continent cannot be transformed or changed unless its people change their behavior. Zawadi Mdibo, CGTN, Kigali, Rwanda.
Now let's take you to West Africa, where Burkina Faso has revived medical cotton production after years of inactivity. This follows the enactment of an industrial sovereignty policy by President Ibrahim Traoré. The plan aims to revitalize local expertise and domestic production and symbolizes the resurgence of Burkina Faso's textile industry. The country recorded a cotton production of 314,293 tons for the 2025-2026 season. This represents a 7% increase compared to the previous season. However, the cotton processing rate remains low, with over 80% exported in its raw state to Asia and Europe. The government is providing at least 75% of funding for the cotton production revival.
The advantage of local production is that it ensures sovereignty in the pharmaceutical sector. It creates jobs and ensures reliability, as the national laboratory is authorized to monitor product quality before they are placed on the market. We need to maximize local production, even if this will depend on energy costs. This is something the government could perhaps look into by granting subsidies to factories to enable them to operate efficiently and achieve better productivity, while at the same time producing high-quality, low-cost products.
Tanzania has commissioned its biggest power project, adding more than 2,000 megawatts to the national grid. Officials say the new capacity supports the country's clean energy ambitions, industrial growth, and could eventually turn Tanzania into a regional electricity exporter. CGTN's Isaac Lucando with that report.
Inside Tanzania's Nyerere National Park, the Rufiji River has been harnessed to generate power on an unprecedented scale. The Julius Nyerere hydropower project is one of the largest hydropower facilities in Africa. Its reservoir extends for about 100 kilometers and can hold roughly 33 billion cubic meters of water. Built at a cost of roughly $2.9 billion, the project has more than doubled Tanzania's electricity generation capacity.
This plant has a total of 9 generating units, with each capable of producing 235 megawatts, giving it a total generating capacity of 2,115 megawatts.
%60 of Tanzania's electricity generation. The challenge now is turning that additional capacity into industrial growth at home and eventually electricity exports across the region.
The government says it is in talks on potential electricity exports to neighboring countries including Zambia, the Democratic Republic of Congo and Kenya. However, it warns that as demand grows, the newly found power surplus may be short-lived.
As we continue attracting investment into Tanzania, demand for electricity is increasing. The surplus power we have today may not be enough in 3 or 4 years. That is why we are continuing to develop electricity generation from other sources.
To keep pace with rising demand, the government says it is looking to balance hydroelectricity with natural gas, wind, geothermal and solar power. The goal is to reach 8,000 megawatts of national generation capacity by 2030. For now, the country's biggest power plant is shifting Tanzania's energy ambitions from simply meeting domestic demand to potentially supplying power to a growing regional market. Isaac Lucando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
And here's what's coming up in sports. Africa's record signing Yan Diomande is officially presented as a Real Madrid player.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Un premier, je dirais que je suis fier